Hello, I'm Sherman Augustus, and this is number 0778, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0778. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet Chris Martin, who is the owner of the Tri-City Chili Peppers, a minor league baseball team in Virginia. They've created something called Cosmic Baseball, where they play at night under only black light, and the balls, bats, bases, and uniforms glow in the dark. Was this a daunting process to get the light manufacturers to create the lights needed?
It definitely took some poking a little bit, right? I mean, I didn't understand what black lights were capable of. So when I first approached Federated Lighting and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking, they just kind of said, Chris, you can install 300 black lights onto this field and it still might not work. There's no black light out there that exists that would be strong enough to emit enough light that could be put on light poles. They kind of went back to one of their partners and said, hey, can we create this for them? And the cool thing is they jumped on board and was really excited to be a part of it, and they created this black light for us.
Don Sawyer is the author of the urban fantasy novel The Burning Gem, the story of hidden worlds beneath our own. Don believes that urban fantasy is just a way of looking at what's going on in our own world.
I think it's a way of looking at our own world. It's kind of like a mirror image. In this particular case, we're dealing with an evil cabal that is bent on keeping society apart. We don't know this initially, but these gems, which are actually crystallized portions of a customer's soul, activate their sort of basest instincts. What we find out later is that this is all moving toward affirming a society that's based on the idea that some people are intended to rule and others are intended to be ruled.
Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is back with the weird story for the month of July. This one deals with a man named Mr. Boys who willed his body to science and the girls.
First of all, this man was named Mr. Boys, John Boys, who wanted to leave his body to the girls. Mr. Boys died in 1836. Prior to that, he had made out a will. He wanted to be donated to be dissected and have his body explored and turned into chemicals and just let them do whatever they needed. And he willed all of his possessions to a friend of his named Eliza Morgan. In addition to that, he wanted his remains not just to be dissected and explored, but to also be turned into what he claimed were essential salts for his lady friends to use.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news and, of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0778, was actor Sherman Augustus, who is also a martial artist and former NFL player. He is best known for his role as Nathaniel Moon on the AMC series Into the Badlands. He's very, very busy these days, currently filming Stranger Things. He's also got a graphic novel series called The Daughters of Django, and he produced an independent film called Death Letter Blues. He's very, very busy. We need to have him back on the show to talk about all the things he's doing of late. In the meantime, thank you very much, Sherman, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. A Polk County, Florida sheriff's deputy on patrol couldn't help but notice a red Jeep as it drove along the highway. The driver was repeatedly honking the vehicle's horn. The deputy pulled the car over to find out what the problem was. 34-year-old Douglas Morris, a corrections officer at the Polk Correctional Institute, a state prison, explained he honked the Jeep's horn because it makes him drive faster. Well, this sounds like a bad movie.
Evil has visited the earth in many forms.
Now it returns as the car.
The deputy returned to his patrol car to write Morse a citation, which upset Morse. He called 911 to complain. The dispatcher, of course, notified the deputy, who went back to Morse and told him to hang up the phone.
Nowhere to hide, no way to stop the car.
Morse refused, so the deputy took control of Morse's arm to remove him from the vehicle. Morse tried to fight back, but the deputy prevailed and arrested him on charges of misusing 911 and resisting arrest. What would make a member of law enforcement like Douglas Morse snap? Maybe he was possessed by, the car.
There's nowhere to turn, nowhere to hide, no way to stop the car.
A Polk County, Florida sheriff's deputy responded to a Ponciana store where a man had dialed 911 to say that he was having suicidal thoughts. The deputy spoke to Christopher Harris, who allegedly admitted he wasn't suicidal. He was tired of living in his current residence and wanted a place to spend the night. His reported plan was to be committed to a mental hospital, then when he was discharged to get a ride back to Tampa, because his mom didn't want to come pick him up. He was arrested, charged with misusing 911. Somehow I get the feeling that jail time wouldn't be a punishment for this guy. Sending him back to his mother's house would be. A professional clown in Pennsylvania was arrested after he allegedly tried to embark on a secret side hustle as a male sex worker.
I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you?
No, but the shoes are hysterical. 28-year-old Francis Bowie of Scranton was caught when he allegedly met with an undercover officer posing as a potential client. Bowie placed an ad on a local classifieds website in the escort section, advertising himself in a sexually explicit manner.
Kiss me, fat boy!
The ad also listed the clown's phone number, which prompted an officer with the Carbondale Police Department to text as a prospective client. In the text message exchange, the accused allegedly offered to perform sexual acts without a condom on the undercover cop at a rate of $100 per hour. The officer allegedly agreed to the price and arranged a rendezvous at a Carbondale hotel.
A little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down your pants.
Bowie was arrested when he showed up at the hotel. The clown, who performed at local events as the Amazing Franco, allegedly told police it was the first time he turned to prostitution and he knew it was wrong. Well, he knew it was wrong, so why did he do it? Was he starting some sort of cult or movement?
Come on. Do I look like the kind of clown that could start a movement?
Point taken. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, an Iowa man has pleaded guilty to enjoying the pleasure of his own company outside a come-and-go convenience store. And seriously, that's a chain that really should consider changing their name.
The more you use your Come and Go and Rewards card, the more you get.
After completing the manual override in front of customers, 55-year-old Kenneth Lee Kelly departed for his nearby Iowa City residence. In a written plea, Kelly recently copped to indecent exposure, a serious misdemeanor. A sentencing hearing has been set for August the 15th. When originally questioned by police, Kelly, whose rap sheet includes theft and narcotics convictions, claimed he wasn't really exposing himself, but instead he was just scratching his genitals. Now that he has pleaded guilty, he could face up to a year in jail.
Start rewarding yourself with more today. Come and Go, where and means more.
Geez, does anybody in the company actually hear their own tagline? Anyway, let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? There are different ways to get fans in the stands for baseball games. If you remember, just a little while ago, we spoke to the folks from the Savannah Bananas who are doing something different and exciting for baseball. Well, they're not the only ones. The Tri-City Chili Peppers in Colonial Heights, Virginia, are literally lighting up the baseball world. They are playing night games under blacklight, which means the ball, bats, bases, and uniforms glow in the dark. It's called Cosmic Baseball. And joining us via Zoom is Chris Martin, the owner of the Tri-City Chili Peppers. Hi, Chris.
How are you?
Just tickety-boo. Thank you very much for being on the program with us. I understand you were a bit like a dog with a bone. You really wanted to do this and worked heaven and earth, basically, to make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an idea that kind of came to me. And at the end of the day, not knowing exactly if it was going to work or not, we figured, hey, throw it out there. Why not? What's the worst thing that can happen? And the best thing that can happen is you make history. So that's exactly what we did.
So how did the idea come to you in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, there's always things that we're thinking about of how do we improve our fan experience. And so it started there, and it was a simple concept where we've got our fans and they're in the stands, shaking around light up sticks. And it's honestly, it's kind of lame because you're sitting under there in normal white lights and they're shaking around these glow sticks and it doesn't work, right? Our fans loved it at the time, don't get me wrong. It's still a cool concept, but I was like, how do you make this better? And ultimately it came down to, well, if you turn the lights off, it would be a better atmosphere because the sticks are actually glowing with different lights, but then you can't play baseball. So what's the next thing you can do? Well, you can turn the lights off and install black lights and play it that way. So that's exactly what we did. And it turned out to be really incredible.
Now, you have a stadium, I believe it seats 2,000, correct?
Yeah, correct. It seats a little bit over 2,000 people.
Okay, so it's not a big stadium, and it's not a large moneymaker. It's minor league baseball. So I'm just wondering, what kind of expense was there to install black lights where the other lights normally would be shining on the game?
Yeah. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you're in the $100,000 to $200,000 range to accomplish what we did at our stadium. So it wasn't a small expense by any means for us. And you're exactly right. It's like, hey, does this even make sense? And for me, it's not even about the revenue side of it. It's about creating an ultimate fan experience, right? Coming out to a place and never seeing something done like this before. And so that's honestly where we started. We continue to focus on our fans every single time that we come out there is how do we create a great experience? And luckily for us, it was a great investment. It was a great move and continued to generate revenue in different areas such as merchandise and just ticketing process, selling out other games because of it as well. So it worked out very well, but yeah, it was definitely a risk that I would say not many other people would be willing to take on something that's so unknown.
So when you reached out to the lighting experts and came up with this idea, did they immediately become or come on board, or was it a situation where, oh, there's that crazy Chris Martin again?
Yeah, no, it definitely took some poking a little bit, right? I mean, just trying to understand. I didn't understand what black lights were capable of. So when I first approached Federated Lighting and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking, they just kind of said, Chris, you can install 300 black lights onto this field and it still might not work. There's no black light out there that exists that would be strong enough to emit enough light that can be put on light poles. And so they kind of went back to one of their partners, which is Sonoray, and said, hey, can we create this for them? And the cool thing is they jumped on board and was really excited to be a part of it. And they created this black light for us.
So once they created the black light, as I mentioned in the introduction, the ball, bats, bases, and uniforms glow in the dark. Is there anything you had to do to those items to treat them, to make them stand out more? Or is it just the standard uniform, standard ball, so on and so forth?
Yeah, so Tucci, our bat company that we've always used in the Coastal Plain League and the Tri-City Chili Peppers, they figured it out pretty quick. They felt like they had a color that they can blend together to make it happen. They had to make a couple of adjustments to it And same with the jersey company. 3 and 2 had to send us a bunch of different samples and try and figure out what would work. And they ultimately had to blend together 2 different colors to kind of create this neon style jersey that would react the way that we wanted to. We had multiple other companies turn us down, say no, we can't do that, and it's not something that we plan to be a part of. And then we met with Wilson Sporting Goods, and Wilson said, yeah, we're all on board. I mean, this is the world's largest sporting goods manufacturer. Said, we're on board. We'll create you a ball. And unfortunately, it's been stuck a little bit. We actually thought we were going to have it in place for opening day, and got stuck a little bit. And so we actually had to create our own baseball that we've been playing with for year 1. Year 2, we'll have a new style ball that is altered and changed around a little bit. But we manufactured our own baseball in-house and designed it, creating a certain powder feel to it that you see in pictures and videos of it shooting off the baseball, which has actually become one of the signature pieces that fans really love. And people are running around offering $1,000 for one baseball for kids. And it's kind of crazy and different, but that's kind of what we've had to do. So the baseball has been the most challenging piece.
I would also assume that one of the challenging pieces is safety. Were there any safety concerns about literally playing baseball in the dark?
Yeah. So that's kind of the first concept, right? Is like, hey, can we do this? When I took a baseball and we threw it up as high as we could in the air, and we were catching it with our bare hands because we didn't have mitts out there at the time. And we were like, holy crap, we could do this. And this was just with one light. And so kind of circling back around to it, our guys could see it extremely well. And that was our biggest piece. We brought kids in, we brought players in, said, hey, can you do this in black light? Let's hit it around. Let's see how it goes. And the kids a lot of the comments were, hey, we can actually see this ball better in this lighting environment than we can in a normal white light environment out of the stadium. So no, it was immediately, can we do this? Is it safe enough to do? And then what are some of the things that we may have to do or implement or change to make sure that is a safe environment? And kind of what we found out is this is something very doable. The kids are loving it. They feel safe. They feel comfortable. It's not any more challenging to see it. And so that's been really, really fun.
Obviously, you did some testing, as you mentioned earlier. I'm just wondering, when you finally rolled this out and decided that this was going to happen and you were going to have a stadium full of people, what was your feeling before it took place?
Nervousness, right? I mean, there were still unknowns, right? You can test as much as you want privately with no fans in the stadium. But then when you roll out 2,000 plus fans, I think we had 2,200 fans at the ballpark the opening game. You just don't know what's going to happen, right? We had some slight concerns of would the fan interaction of everybody wearing reactive gears in the stadium interfere with the ball being green and lit up. So there were so many unknowns, as well as the pace of play, right? Like learning how are the fans going to react based on the pace of the play. But the very first pitch was thrown. The guy hit a ground ball to first base, routine out. We had a walk-off game winner at the end of that game, and we had a diving play in right field. So there were so many unknowns and nervousness of like, how is this going to happen? But it all kind of came to fruition that night, and it was a great night. And
you talked about the reaction of the crowd. Did the crowd react any differently than an average home game?
Oh, yeah, completely different. I mean, the fans were pretty excited to be out there and be a part of it. I mean, we've got great fans, right? And that's one of our big pieces is fan entertainment. But when the lights went out and you heard 2,000 people scream and then the black lights cut on and you hear them scream again, you look around, you see grown adults looking like kids, right? And it's just a different environment. A lot of times adults will continue to be professional, but in that black light environment in cosmic baseball, everybody felt like a kid in that moment and that time in it. And so it was definitely a really cool, surreal atmosphere.
So now that you've had the success of this and it's literally gone viral, what are the future plans?
Yeah, so we added 2 more games to the schedule immediately, and they sold out within 24 hours and sold out other games because of it as well. And, looking forward to 2025, it's keeping up with the demand and the excitement for it. And trying to figure out what the next step is definitely a big challenging question. Is do we continue and have multiple games at home, which we plan to do, right? We plan to have 5 more home games at least next year. This year we currently have 6 on the schedule, but we're looking at 5 for next year at least, and then possibly some expansion stuff with that as well.
And what about your brethren, the other team owners out there? Are they looking at this and going, maybe this is an idea that we should adopt?
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of phone calls. I mean, from professional hockey, professional soccer, baseball, football, I mean, everything that you can think of from a professional level, we've had phone calls on. We are under patent pending with the application of black lights in a sporting environment. So basically black lights being used with the combination of apparel and other equipment needed to play in the game. So there's things that we're working on with multiple sports of, hey, is this possible? And if it is possible, how is it implemented? So it's definitely been one of those things that we're trying to kind of absorb and take all in and grow from.
There must have been somebody along the way when you expressed this idea, even to your friends, never mind the lighting company. There must have been somebody who said, Chris, you're crazy. What are they saying now?
So you're talking about my wife. Yeah. She, no, look, my wife's always on board, and she's such a big supporter in everything that I do. But she looked at me at one point and said, "Hey, are you investing too much into this? What are we doing?" You know, and now obviously she loves it. Our families love it. Our friends, employees, the city officials. We had the governor come into town the other day and, asking questions about it and digging into it. So it's just been, we have so many supporters on this, but a lot of people looked at me like I was a little bit crazy. And what do you mean you're going to play baseball in black light? Like, it's not something we do. And, but now it is. So.
Well, baseball has always been my favorite sport. It's the grand old game. And you have managed to do something that is new to the grand old game. So congratulations on that. And thank you very, very much, Chris, for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Chris Martin, owner of the Tri-City Chili Peppers in Colonial Heights, Virginia, and the creator of Cosmic Baseball. You can go to my website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0778, and you'll find links to the team's website. Also, check out their YouTube page so that you can see Cosmic Baseball for yourself. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like, but the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestuffileprogram. Coming to you from the outskirts of sanity, this is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come on the program, we'll talk to Don Sawyer, the author of The Burning Gem. Plus, Marc Hartzman is in for his monthly visit, sharing the weird story, for the month of July. We also have more Stuff File news and, of course, an idiot of the day coming your way a little later on. But let's continue with the Stuff File news right here, right now. A couple were filmed engaging in an explicit act with a margarita inside a restaurant and were later arrested after the wife complained to cops about the X-rated video spreading online. Joe Boyette took a now viral video of himself attempting to funnel a margarita down the butt of his wife, Mary Sweats, inside Rodeo Mexican Restaurant in Waycross, Georgia. However, Boyette couldn't get the funnel to work, so he tossed it and poured the tequila-based beverage from the pitcher straight down his wife's rear end as she was on all fours in the restaurant's booth. It was only after Sweats went to authorities that police knew of their salt-rimmed shenanigans, but once they were made aware of the video, they arrested the pair. Meanwhile, the eatery is investigating the incident themselves. They said in a statement, "We recently became aware of an inappropriate incident that took place in our restaurant. We want to make it clear that such behavior is completely unacceptable and does not reflect our values or mission to provide a family-friendly dining experience. Well, I'm guessing the couple are completely confused about the term eating out. Anyway, after being caught using drugs, 47-year-old Jamie Hunt was fired from Freedom Tour, a charity that uses pantry trucks to deliver food to underserved communities in Polk County, Florida. One of its trucks was donated by the Polk County Sheriff's Office. Hunt stopped by the church in Eloise, spotted the sheriff's donated truck loaded with $25,000 worth of food, and looked inside. The keys were in it, so he allegedly drove it to Winetta, about 3 miles away. According to Sheriff Grady Judd, while he was visiting friends, he gave them some potato salad. Meanwhile, someone at the church noticed the truck was missing and called the sheriff. A deputy headed that way from Winetta and followed the truck as Hunt went back to the church. Hunt, who had a warrant out for his arrest on theft charges, was arrested, and new charges of grand theft, driving with a suspended license, because they always have a suspended license in these stories, and burglary of an unoccupied structure were added to his list of charges. Said Judd, "We support Freedom Tour. They do a great job. We put Hunt in jail. He didn't do a great job." Oh, sure, Hunt had several previous charges against him, but in the grand scheme of things, it appears the one thing that was his downfall? Potato salad. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, turns out Google shortcuts aren't always the best directions. A 23-year-old man found out the hard way when he was stranded by himself in his Toyota Tercel on Strawberry Peak in Wasatch County, Utah, late at night. The incident happened on July the 4th. The driver called 911 and claimed the route he'd taken was the shortcut that Google recommended. The Wasatch County Search and Rescue Team took 3 hours to get the driver back down the mountain. A Google spokesperson said in a statement that safety is a top priority and whenever possible, we aim to route drivers on paved roads. While our investigation has not yet identified roads in maps that led to this location, we'll make any necessary updates to accurately route local drivers. Gee, that's so encouraging. Of course, this isn't the first time a navigation tool didn't help a driver arrive at their destination. Just last year, tourists drove their cars into a Hawaii harbor just weeks apart in 2 separate occasions because it was the route that GPS suggested, as in down a boat ramp at Honokaha Harbor. I personally never trust GPS. I just imagine what it said to that Toyota Tercel driver after he got lost.
Recalculating. Oops, this will take a moment. Recalculating. Oh boy, this is hopeless. You're screwed.
And let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff All program, shall we? Don Sawyer is the author of over a dozen books. His latest one is called The Burning Gem, which is the story of hidden worlds beneath our own. Don joins us via Zoom from St. Catharines, Ontario. Hi, Don.
Hi, Peter. How are you today?
Just tickety-boo. Thanks very much for being on the program with us. We live in tumultuous times right now. We're not necessarily crazy about our own world, and now we're learning about hidden worlds beneath our own. Tell us how this story came to be.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, urban fantasy, which is what this is, in many ways, I think is a way of looking at our own world. It's kind of like a mirror image. In this particular case, we're dealing with a cabal, an evil cabal that is bent on keeping society apart. We don't know this initially, but these gems, which are actually crystallized portions of a customer's soul, activate their sort of basest instincts. And what we find out later is that this is all moving toward affirming a society that's based on the idea that some people are intended to rule and others are intended to be ruled, kind of based on Nietzsche's worst concepts of beyond good and evil. So as we are looking at this unfold and seeing the efforts that are being made to enhance tribalism, to enhance fear of the other, that we begin to see, maybe that's not so far off the mark. Even though in this particular case, it's taking a form of sorcery and magic. So yeah, and I've always written along those lines. I mean, if I don't have something to say, I don't want to bother, writing. So I like the idea too. Like Neil Gaiman's one of my favorite writers, and he does a great job of creating these alternate worlds that are just below our feet, literally, but also we can be there, we can feel it. Some of the urban fantasy stuff it seems to me, it's just more dragon tales, whereas this is supposed to be a human story, a very human story. And be honest with you, I think some of the biggest monsters are human, don't you?
Absolutely. Now, when did you start writing this story? And the reason why I ask the question is sometimes we get to see parallels of what's happening in our world currently. And I'm just wondering, did you start writing the story and then you saw things that are happening after you wrote the story that are going, that are saying, oh, geez, I'm too spot on here?
I know exactly what you mean. Unfortunately, I think these trends have been around for a long time. And I sort of picked up on that, right from the very beginning. And I actually have been working on this book for about 8 years. It started off as a single book, but it turned into a 190,000 word doorstopper. So I ended up breaking it up into two, and I think that works much better that way. But yeah, unfortunately, I think it's an issue that's been with us maybe for our entire history of our species, is that fear of the other. That I remember a Canadian anthropologist saying, those groups who saw new people in their territory and said, oh, look, new friends, let's have them over for dinner. Well, they're probably not in the gene pool anymore. And so, that basic distrust may be, something that we have to contend with, but it's also something that's dysfunctional in this contemporary society. And that's what I wanted to get at.
Now, you yourself, you have an interesting past in that you have been working in various cultural backgrounds and in also various locales. And I'm just wondering if that comes to play in what you write, not only in your previous books, but in this one, The Burning Gem.
Absolutely. And in two ways. I mean, first of all, just the settings, like in the case of The Burning Gem. Much of it's set in Budapest, and Budapest is a city that I find absolutely fascinating. It's also a city that has a tragic past. It's been overrun by every horde known to man. There was the Red Terror and the White Terror, and so it's a city that's kind of haunted by a lot of the human tragedies that have unfortunately plagued us. So I spent a lot of time, not a lot of time, but enough time in Hungary to get a feel for it, but also London, where the Mester, who may or may not be human, who's sort of at the center of this cabal, and that area outside of Smithfield Market, which is an area that's always fascinated me, where they used to draw and quarter people publicly. But besides the physical settings, I think, like working in Africa, you come to realize that there's different ways of being in the world. And yours certainly isn't the only one. I had a wonderful session with a shaman up in northern Ghana, and it's like, hey, I don't know, and so the magic, sorcery, not sorcery in this case, but magic, very different ways of being in the world have always been really interesting to me. And to understand that ours is only one of those and not necessarily the best one. And so some of that, I think, definitely, permeates the book as well.
You've been, as I mentioned, several places in the world, and you have settled in Canada, but you're not originally from here.
No, I came up from Michigan in 1969 and went to the University of British Columbia. At that point, my career arc was very clear. I was going to be a professor of modern Chinese history until I actually had to confront the Chinese language. And at which point everybody decided I was probably better out in the fields behind a water oxen. So I left that program. And fortunately, of course, as most people in those at those levels, you've never done anything much other than be in school. So I was looking for a job. I didn't, for a variety of reasons, which we can or cannot go into. I was going back to the States. And so I worked my way east and ended up getting a wonderful job in a small outport teaching job in Newfoundland, outside of Gander. And that was in 1970, 72. And my wife and I both worked there. And it was an absolutely magical 2 years in a magical place with wonderful people. And the kids taught us how to teach because I'd never had a teaching course. And I think maybe that's the best way to learn, frankly. So yeah, we've had, we've kind of bracketed Canada. Then I went and worked in a First Nations community in British Columbia, and then I've done workshops up in Rankin Inlet, and so it's Canada's a great country, and I'm proud to be part of it.
And as I mentioned, over a dozen books. When did you start writing, and when did you realize that writing was something that you loved to do, or was that always a passion from childhood and you just decided to express it later in life?
I mean, I wrote in, high school and stuff like that, but I never really thought of I still don't really think of myself as an author. I think of myself as a writer. I've done a lot of writing in curriculum, all different kinds of areas. But the first book, Tomorrow is School, and I'm sick to the heart thinking about it, which was a note that one of our students left at our house in Newfoundland when we were teaching there. It was such an intense and wonderful experience. I felt I had to share it. And I had a mentor, Tom Wayman, who's a poet, Canadian poet, who said, "Man, this is great stuff. You could write a book about this." I said, "No, Tom, I can't do that." Yes, he said, "You can." So unfortunately, my father was dying at the time, and I had some time on my hands because I was with him in the last 6 months of his life. And so I started writing, and everything is in a yellow legal pad, all scribbled down. And my long-suffering wife of 55 years was the only one who could read it. So she typed it out into a manuscript form. And I was very fortunate to have it taken by Douglas and McIntyre, and it did very well, became a Canadian bestseller. So it was kind of like an unexpected but very happy occurrence.
And your current book, again, The Burning Gem, is a fantasy novel. What is it about fantasy that you enjoy?
I think, the whole, I love world building. One of the publishers that I worked with had a slogan that said, "Reading takes you places," which I always kind of liked in more ways than one. But when you're, one of my favorite writers is Ursula Le Guin, and she has one of the forwards to one of her books. She says, when you're reading a book, a really good book, you're temporarily insane because you are out of touch with reality and in another reality. And I think that's really true. And fantasy is one of those genres where it not only takes you maybe next door or the next city, it takes you to another world. And I find that challenging and exciting. And if it's done well, it challenges again your perceptions. Ursula Le Guin's book, The Left Hand of Darkness, was a remarkable book in that sense because it turns out the people on this particular planet can manifest both male and female genitalia, and so they can both have children. And so you're reading this along and say, what the hell? That doesn't, no, oh, wait a minute, your very pillars of understanding are kind of shot. And with this book, I try to do the same thing, like not to that extent, or I'm sure that level of achievement, but one of the action is set in a place called the Market, which is an abandoned railway station, which really was abandoned in 1873. But they've transformed it into this utopian syndicalist community with all of these sort of marginalized people with different powers, different skills, but who've always been kind of and now this is kind of a refuge for them. So that idea of walking into this place where there's people from 73 countries and people who, are for example, the place is illuminated by, obviously I'm making this up, by two members of the Manhattan Project who, of course, left and came to this refuge and created a nuclear sun that illuminates this giant, where now all these hundreds of people now live in a kind of a utopian community. So I want to create that, let people see what's possible. Fantasy allows you to do that. You're not bound by the constrictions of reality, but at the same time, the best fantasy to me is stuff that connects with our realities and gets us to reflect on them.
Well, we're just about out of time. I've got one very, very quick question to just ask, and I'm just wondering if you think that readers of fantasy by nature have to be very open-minded.
That's an interesting question. I think if you're not open-minded, yeah, I never really thought about it that way. But because, if you're not open-minded to going in, you're going to be open-minded as you go through it because it demands open-mindedness, right? Because you've got to let loose of the peer, of what attaches you to this reality. Now, I mean, sometimes it's just a diversion. I mean, I've read, as you probably, I don't know if you read fantasy or not, but a lot of it's just kind of like, sword and sorcery, and it's all entertaining, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think that's great. But it doesn't require a whole lot. It doesn't challenge your values or your attitudes or your perception of the world. So I think that probably is less challenging. But I think some of the really great fantasy does require an open mind, or at least forces you to open your mind.
Well, the current book is called The Burning Gem. And Don, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Gosh, Peter, it was a real pleasure. I wish we had more time. Thank you so much.
Don Sawyer, author of The Burning Gem. You can go to my website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0778, and you'll find the link to Don's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Here's a brief word about our show and my book. If you become a regular Patreon patron of the Stuff File program, I'll give you an e-version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. It's easy to do. Just go to patreon.com and become a patron to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. So, join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
You're listening to the Stuff File program. It's the choice of 4 out of 5 dentists. The 5th dentist also listens, but that's just because he follows the crowd. Here's Peter Anthony Holder.
And still to come on the program, we will talk with Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, with the weird story for the month of July. Plus, we have an Idiot of the Day coming your way, and a few more Stuff File news stories to share with you here right now on this program. So let's get back to it. Vending machines selling ammunition will now be in grocery stores in Alabama, Texas, and Oklahoma, a move that has generated mixed feelings from officials in those states. American Rounds, the distributor of the machines, uses AI technology to scan the customer's identification as well as facial recognition software to verify a customer's identity. The software works together to verify the buyer's age and that the person using the machine matches the identification scanned. Each machine sells ammunition for various firearm calibers, including rifles, shotguns, and handguns. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives has allowed the machines, saying, in a statement, a federal license is not required to sell ammunition. However, commercial sales of ammunition must comply with state laws as well as any applicable federal laws. The company plans to expand into more states, receiving offers from stores in California, Florida, and Hawaii, among others. Yeah, I can just see the typical situation. Hurry, honey, before the grocery store closes, we need milk, eggs, diapers, and ammo. Yeah. What could possibly go wrong here? I guess we'll just have to wait on future shows to find out. And finally, a fleet of drones patrolling New York City's beaches for signs of sharks and struggling swimmers is drawing backlash from an aggressive group of seaside residents. Those seaside residents? Local shorebirds. It's a fight for real estate on the beach, a conflict between the city and Mother Nature. City agencies have expanded their use of drones in recent years, and Rockaway residents say they have noticed an increase in the number of drones taking flight, whether it's for shark sightings or rescue operations at the beach. However, the modern technology is creating some confusion among the local wildlife, despite efforts by the NYPD and FDNY to ensure their safety. Flocks of birds have repeatedly swarmed the drones, forcing the agency to adjust their flight plans. City officials said most of these angry bird incidents involve the American oystercatcher, which have nesting sites in the sand along Rockaway Beach. No birds have been harmed, but officials say there have been several close calls. City officials and some community members warn the drones have ruffled a few feathers as flocks of birds have repeatedly swarmed the device, forcing the NYPD and other city agencies to adjust their flight plans. The drones come equipped with inflatable life rafts that can be dropped on distressed swimmers, though no rescues have been performed by doing so thus far. However, the devices did spot their first shark last week, which resulted in the closure of most of Rockaway Beach. No birds have been harmed, but as I've mentioned, officials have said there have been several close calls. Gee, I've always wanted to see a combined sequel to Hitchcock's The Birds and Spielberg's Jaws. This could be it. Anyway, let's get to our last guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is back with a weird story for the month of July. This one deals with a man who wanted to leave his body to the girls. Marc joins us via Skype from New York. And Marc, on the surface, this sounds a little bit like what someone would say in the interrogation room on an episode of Law & Order Special Victims Unit.
Well, this is maybe even weirder. This man, first of all, this man was named Mr. Boys, John Boys, who wanted to leave his body to the girls, which I thought was kind of funny also. So Mr. Boys died in 1836. And prior to that, he had made out a will. He was about 82 when he wrote this very bizarre will, where he wanted to basically not have any kind of big burial. He didn't like the pomp and circumstance of an actual burial. He wanted to be donated to be dissected and have his body, explored and turned into chemicals and just let them do whatever they needed. And he turned over he willed all of his possessions to a friend of his named Eliza Morgan, who I believe, according to articles, was his housekeeper. So in addition to that, he wanted his remains not just to be dissected and explored, but to also be turned into what he claimed were essential salts for his lady friends to use.
Oh, dear.
And not only that, he wanted his guts to be made into fiddle strings so that they could be played and make music. And he also wanted what he called his vitreous particles to be also put into telescope glasses so that when astronomers were viewing the heavenly bodies, they would be looking through parts of him as they looked into the sky.
Wow.
So this was his will. This was what he wanted as he was dying.
Wow. Again, like I said, the interrogation room on Law and Order, this would have Olivia Benson's hair on fire.
Yeah. Well, and there's more.
Oh, there's
of course,
more?
'Cause not weird enough yet, right?
Okay.
So before he died, he also wanted to he didn't want the pomp and circumstance at his death. I mean, as he was being buried, because he didn't want to be buried, any of that kind of stuff. But he did want to have a bit of a show when he was dying. So as he was like on his deathbed, he basically wanted to have fiddlers nearby and dancing girls. And he said he wanted to be, this was a quote, he wanted to be fiddled and danced out of the world, which I intend is a satire on the deathbed repentance. So he was making his own sort of pomp and circumstance around the whole process of dying, and then sort of what his little posthumous adventures would be like in terms of, essential salts, smelling salts, looking at the skies, and playing and having music played with his guts.
Do we know anything about what he was leaving to his housekeeper? I mean, did he have some wealth or no?
Yeah, he did. He
Okay.
had some wealth. He was also leaving, and this is from his will. This was, by the way, I should mention, this was a story that was posted on July 11th, 1838. They were talking about this bizarre will. And so he was also leaving all of his furniture, his tables, his bed linens. He mentioned his apparel, plates, watches, and, quote, trinkets of every kind. So pretty much anything. Oh, yeah, piano forte in his library, manuscripts, papers. So this was all the things he had, all of his possessions he was leaving to her, and money as well. So he wanted her to enjoy that and then be able to enjoy what remained of him as well.
And the smelling bottles that he wants to leave to the girls.
Yeah.
How many girls are we talking about here?
Well, I think for sure Eliza Morgan. I think she may have had a daughter as well. And I suppose maybe some other friends in addition. Maybe some of the dancing girls that he wanted to be at his bedside when he was dying.
Wow. So do we know? I mean, it's one thing to have a will. It's one thing to write a will. It's another thing for that will to be executed the way the decedent wants that will executed. So do we know if any of this happened?
So it's a very good question, and I was wondering that myself. The main part of the will, of course, is leaving all those possessions to Eliza, and then it talks about how the fact that in addition to all that, there's this strange request about his posthumous adventures with becoming fiddle strings and essential salts. But it doesn't, and again, so he died in 1836. This article is from 1838, and it doesn't mention if all of that happened. If he was turned into fiddle strings, and if he was, helping, creating certain aromas in the bedrooms of these women, and looking at the stars with astronomers. So we don't know for sure if this was followed through exactly as he hoped, but I'd like to think that it was. This was his final will, and it should be respected.
If he was turned into fiddle strings, he could still be out there.
That's right. And I wonder what that fiddle would be worth. It's like those. I'm forgetting the term now because it's a long term, but there's the book covers made out of human skin, so you can live on as a book cover. This is living on as a fiddle. I think that's nice.
Okay.
You're making glorious music in your death.
Okay.
I suppose that depends on the musician, though.
It also depends on the musician, exactly. And if they want to play with fiddle sticks from a dead person. Although, we talk about the fact that they're often made from cat gut.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Is that much different?
I'm not sure. That's a human gut fiddle. Why not?
Now, when or where, and more importantly, why, did you come along this story?
You know what? I don't remember how I came across this story. It is a very bizarre one. And I wrote this up for Weird Historian a while back. I actually was thinking about that too. Like, how did I come across, usually I'm looking for bizarre keywords when I'm finding these stories. And I can't remember what keyword I would have looked up to find a man who wanted to be turned into smelling salts and fiddle strings when he died. That's not, even for me, that's not a typical type of search I would do. I may have just stumbled across it. These things sometimes find me.
Well, I was just about to say, because of that, you and I are literally in the same boat. Where my search engine goes, it's a slippery slope. I would hate for somebody to see my browser history. It's just very, very weird. Just from the stories that I come up with and the guests that I sometimes have, it leads me down so many different rabbit holes, as I would assume it does for you.
Yeah, you start having to dig deeper and find yourself putting in very bizarre keywords. I totally agree.
Absolutely. Anyway, another bizarre story for the month of July. I always dare you, come up with something for August.
I will do my best for sure.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com and also the publisher of CuriousPublications.com. He's the author of several books, his most recent one being We Are Not Alone, The Extraordinary History of UFOs and Aliens Invading Our Hopes, Fears, and Fantasies. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0778, and you'll find links to Mark's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order his books directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And now, boys and girls, it's that moment you've been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
When an IT tech noticed that an employee where he worked was using the institutional network to download and upload illegal adult videos, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office didn't need a warrant to investigate. The network is theirs. Investigators traced the traffic to a personal phone belonging to 33-year-old Deputy Trevor Scott Willis, an on-duty jailer. Willis allegedly admitted downloading and sharing the videos, which detectives say involve children aged about 5 to 15. He was arrested. Willis, who had 8 years on the job, resigned, like resignation was an option for him, and he was booked into the jail on multiple felony counts. Now, just about everybody knows you don't upload anything personal at work. So why, oh why, would a sheriff's office deputy upload illegal porn to a network server at work at a police station? One reason, and one reason only. He's an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0778. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0778. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WLSL-LP-FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZH-LP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, CFQR 600 in Montreal, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Let me leave you with these words of wisdom. Never ever juggle ice picks while standing on your waterbed.